Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another interview as part of the RUSA podcast series. Joining me today is Christina Shutt, the new director for the Mosaic Templars Cultural Center, also known as MTCC. MTCC is an African American History Museum in Little Rock, Arkansas. Hi, Christina. How are you?
Good. How are you doing today, Patty?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. There's a time difference, so it's 7 in the morning here, and I believe it's 9 over there. I interviewed
It
some.
is. It
Yeah.
is. And I appreciate you agreeing to call me at this late hour for me and early for you.
No, it's fine. I'm usually awake at this time, but it worked out. It worked out pretty well. So, um, all right. So to begin the interview, I always like to ask everyone if they can tell me a little bit about themselves, your position, and how you ended up where you are.
Well, as you mentioned, my name is Christina Shutt, or Christina Thompson Shutt, as some folks in ALA know me. And my position is serving as director of the museum. So I kind of oversee all of the day-to-day operations. I manage a staff of about 15 right now. And I also kind of plan new programs, initiatives, try and set the vision for the museum. So that's kind of the main thing of what I do in the day-to-day. I guess I ended up here. The long story of how I ended up here is that I met someone at a conference, and they convinced me to move to Arkansas and take a job at Hendrix College. And I really had, after being at Hendrix for about 6 years, I went up for associate professor, associate librarian. And I was happy to get that, but I also was really sort of thinking about, well, where do I want my career to be? What sorts of things do I want to be doing? And one of the things that I really missed about being in academia was getting to be kind of a practicing technician, a practicing archivist, a practicing museum person. And so when the opportunity came up to take my career to a different level, I eagerly took it because, again, it meant getting back into the field, and I guess doing more kind of field work.
How has it been? How do you feel with that with the big transition and going back into becoming a hands-on archivist and practicing that the archival part of who you are and what your career is?
Yeah, it is very different. I love life as an academic. I never realized how much free time I had as an academic until as our public librarian listeners probably understand, until I started working with the public more. So that's definitely been a big transition, and then just learning about all the intricacies of state government and the things you can do and you can't do, especially since I'd worked at really private universities and colleges for most of my kind of career, as it were. And so it was definitely different going to work for the state, but I've really enjoyed it. I have a really supportive boss, and I work in a wonderfully supportive department with other directors who are amazing and experts in their field. And so it's really great just having that kind of resource community to be able to tap into, the same way that I always tapped into the library resource community to do my job as an academic librarian. I have that kind of museum and cultural heritage resource community within our department. So it's been a good transition.
Okay. That's good to hear. I know switching jobs, it's always been a fear of mine. Like, what if I do academics and then I want to go to libraries? I know it's been done, but it's always been like, I don't know. It's always been a fear that I won't be able to apply things to one another. But the more I hear, the more it's a normal thing to do. So,
Yeah, well, and I mean, one of the things about my other job was that I wasn't just the, college's archivist and special collections librarian. I also did instruction, I did reference, I did outreach. So I did things that I think I use in my job now, in the sort of the more public aspects of my job. So I think, for folks that are either just graduating or in library school, I always encourage people, to diversify your skills, get as many kind of different skills as you can.
yeah.
Because one of the things I learned as a librarian is that everything and every job that you have always serves you well, no matter what you do. And that's the beauty of a librarian degree, of like an MLS, is it's really kind of varied and gives you the skills you need really for life,
Yeah.
more than just being a librarian.
It's true. I think you can apply anything to libraries, and so every job is important. So Thank you for sharing that. All right. So today's podcast will be focused around Christina's new position, as she spoke about a little bit before. Christina started her position in June for this year, correct? And she has been developing new initiatives such as Farm in the City and Autism Night at the Museum. So we wanted to discuss these in connection to reference services for a bit. So the first question I have for you, well, the follow-up question I have for you is, can you share a little bit about how the first few months have gone?
The first few months have been great. They have really been an opportunity for me to explore. I guess explore what it looks like to be a librarian working in a museum, and what it means to hold true to sort of those core um, ideas I have about access to information, about the importance of information. You know, this idea that knowledge is power,
Mm-hmm.
and that you can't give informed consent unless you're informed.
Yeah.
And so being a part of, especially being a part of an African American History Museum,
Mm-hmm.
has really been about me sort of exploring these ideas, as well as kind of thinking about who is my community, and what it means for our museum to be engaged with our community on different levels.
That's great to hear. I think it's amazing how we're shifting ordinary or traditional libraries into these spaces where everyone can come, and I like to focus and understand how that's being done. And it's true. There's so many people out there with different skills and experiences. It's like, let's use those to develop our programs and our museums and libraries to fit the needs of others. And not just one community, right, or one type of person. So that's
Well, and I
exciting
think
to.
it's acknowledging too that even within communities, I think there's this assumption that um, especially in the black community, that black people aren't deaf, or black
Mhm.
people aren't visually impaired, or black people don't have autism, or there's this
Mhm.
sort of assumption. And the reality of it is that there are,
Yeah.
people of color that have those things. And so
Exactly.
even when, we're quick to say, oh, well, that's, why are you going to that community? It's, well, that is part of our community.
Yeah.
That is part of our, as you said, that is part of our neighborhood.
Hmm.
And so how can we be open and inclusive to those folks as well?
Yeah, especially children, right? I think these are the moments where we're like, no, these spaces are yours, and we're here for you and to work with you. And I think it's cool to see kids go into the museums, and just be themselves, right? Kids being kids, and
Oh, yeah.
being loud and being, like it's amazing to see when we're trying to quiet kids down, and they're just being kids sometimes, and sometimes I'm like, well, we have to balance it out, right? Because we don't want to stop them from growing and being who they are. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. So you talked a little bit about the new initiatives, but I'm going to go ahead and ask you this question anyways to see if you have anything to add. um, so the next question is, can you tell us a little bit about the new initiatives, or just initiatives you would like to talk about, and how you developed them?
Sure. So our initiatives are kind of new initiatives are really centered on the idea of the museum being a more family friendly
Mm-hmm.
and
Okay.
family inclusive place. And so that's kind of what everything we're doing is sort of centered around. We're going through a strategic planning process as we
Mm-hmm.
prepare for museum accreditation.
Okay.
And so I think that process in and of itself kind of encourages you to really take a kind of inward look at, what are we doing and why are we doing it? So
Uh-huh.
one of the things in our museum, if you walk through today, you would see that the museum is really sort of geared towards adults, towards high school age and adults, and that reflects the design of the time
Mm-hmm.
from 10 years ago. That's how museums were often geared.
Yeah.
If it wasn't a children's museum,
Mm-hmm.
we really didn't think about children being involved or welcome into that process. And so it's trying to be a more family friendly, family inclusive museum. We're sort of, I guess, testing out different ideas and trying different things. So one of the initiatives that I'm really excited about is our Creativity on the Spectrum night,
Okay.
and or Autism night at the museum. And so again, it's really a place to say to families who are affected by the autism spectrum to to say, hey, you're welcome here, that we want you to be a part of our museum, that your children are welcome here. And really, here's an opportunity for you to meet like-minded families like yourself. I think that that's one of the hardest things when you're the parent of a child with special needs or with developmental needs, is just finding other parents and resources around you. And so we have partnered with folks like working with people like the Autism Task Force here in Arkansas to make the night of a success, and have been working with kind of experts in the field to not only make our museum more welcoming, but train our staff on how we can be more welcoming. Because again, that's not something that you get that kind of training in school most times. Yeah. So that's kind of one of the big things we're doing. We've also got, in November, we will be having Farm in the City. And so that idea really, it's kind of a crazy idea I had. Well, and it started because I had met a gentleman, Lamar Williams, at Little Rock Zoo, and we really just hit it off, and we said, hey, we've really got to work together. I think our organizations do awesome things. How can we make this happen? Okay. And so we came up with this idea of, well, let's talk about African American achievements in farming, and let's bring some Arkansas farm animals to the museum. Wow. And so that was sort of the kind of initial seed, and we've expanded that to work with the University of Arkansas Cooperative Extension Service and 4-H to have folks come in and talk about things like a chicken tractor. Ooh. Which is apparently, I'm learning these.
I'm like, whoa, what
things.
Is that?
You have like these little chickens, and they're in a wheelbarrow sort of thing, like a tractor. Oh, okay. I guess like a wheelbarrow thing, and you move the chickens each day, and they eat the grass, and you kind of rotate it around your yard, and you raise chickens that way. Whoa. So we're going to teach people how to do things like that, and we're going to talk about beekeeping. We've got a black beekeeper coming. Oh, okay. And he's bringing a glass hive, and he's going to talk about different types of honey and how bees are so vital to what we eat. Yeah. If it weren't for bees, we wouldn't have they're perfect pollinators. Yeah. So we wouldn't have the diversity of our food without bees. So he's going to talk about things like that. And then, like I said, we've got 4-H coming, and they're bringing a lot of their science equipment and drone. They're bringing a drone, which is used to map fields. Oh, okay. So it's going to be really crazy and cool and awesome, and an opportunity to really talk about something that is really vital to Arkansas. Arkansas is a state that is built on agriculture. We still are a very rural state, and so. It's really an opportunity to talk about that and to talk about, keeping in line with our mission as being an African American History Museum, to talk about Black achievement in farming. So I think it's going to be a really fun day, and it'll be something completely different that we've never done before. And we're going to have a chicken in the museum, so that's going to be really interesting. But she's a very good chicken. I've seen her. She's very well behaved. And she performs excellent. So it'll be interesting.
No, definitely. I don't think I've heard of farm animals and animals in libraries, but never in museums, because you have that traditional idea of you can't touch anything and you can't make a mess at a museum because of all the artifacts and all these historical figures. Historical material, and you're just don't touch anything. So it's amazing to hear that it's a different twist on museums and
exactly. Yeah, my big thing is I always want to be pushing the envelope in a good way, and really encouraging people to think about the museum as a different space. And that was the same thing I felt, as a librarian, that I always wanted to push the envelope. I developed a gaming night, which actually has gotten some popularity over the years. They have tabletop or board game nights at libraries. Have board game clubs and stuff, especially in public libraries. Yeah. But we had a board game, years ago, basically had board game nights at the library as an outreach, again, to, kids that we had that were on the autism spectrum. Because we found that kids, especially, students that were on the autism spectrum, students where English was not their first language, they really did well at board gaming. And so it was a great way to get them in the library doors and to show them that the library was a welcoming place and they could come back and ask me a question when they had that research paper. Yeah. And so I think, I've always that's one of my, I guess, public service philosophy things, if it were, that to really kind of flip the script and help people think of a space as something different. The other day we met with our science museum here in town about ways we can put more science in a history museum. Okay. So, I'm all about anything that's going to encourage people to think outside the box or to think differently about history.
Exactly. And making it history, I think I'm also hearing making history more, I don't know if more relevant is the correct term, right? But it's just that history is always part of your life and it's always being developed, right? So these programs are a reminder of how you never lose history and it should always be part of your life, right? So it's making it
more... that's exactly right. I mean, history, I think, I used to have a sign on my door that said, it was a picture of, it said, men, women, and then colored the bathrooms. Mm-hmm. And I love that because it always reminded me that, we can't know where we're going if we don't know where we came from. And so remembering that we stand on the shoulders of giants, a phrase we often use around here, quoting Newton, and that there were folks that came before us, and that they, because of the sacrifices and the things they did, that paved the way for even our museum to be here. But it also is shaping everything that you see going on today. That history was not created in a vacuum. No. And so all of the just the things you see in the media and the news, they all stem from really unresolved things in history.
Exactly. No, and it's so important. I'm always and it's one of the I was so excited to get the chance to talk to you because I think I wanted to understand museums and how they're being developed and how it's just becoming more relatable. And because I remember growing up and I think we went to libraries more than we went to museums. And I think, well, I don't think it was until I started becoming an adult that I myself started taking myself to museums and inviting with friends and then eventually family members. So it's really cool to see and hear that children and programs in these things are being created in museums. Because I remember when we would go as a school field trip, it was always just, okay, we're going to take a tour. It was never so much of being interactive in that sense. So Farm in the City sounds like an amazing program because you get to go and see how history has played out and is still being played out today, and it's still it's still developing. As silly as it sounds, because history is obviously yesterday was history, but I think sometimes I tend to forget that as an adult. Like history is always being made, and it's really cool to hear all these programs. Correct me if I'm wrong. You said space. You want to see space as something different, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I always want to. I think for me, I'm always trying to re-envision space and re-envision what I'm doing. So one of the things that I don't know if I was crazy to do this or not, but I always want to learn something new every year. That's my goal. Okay. And so I always teach myself a new skill every year. So like this year I was learning how to do canning because I wanted to learn how to can my own vegetables.
Oh, canning.
Yeah, like water bath. Yeah, like homestead. Yeah, anyway, random.
Those are skills that I'm like, I wish I knew. Like canning, that's important.
Yeah, but I think the same philosophy goes to my professional life, right? So every year, when I was an instruction librarian, I would rewrite all of my instruction stuff, or I would tweak it somehow, or I'd tweak the way I did the classes because I feel like our students change every year. Yes. New stuff comes out every year. Like I should be learning something new every year, and so it's sort of a different way of thinking, and it's a lot of work, but I think that it always kept me fresh. And so whether it was, I remember the very first, when I was at Hendrix, the very first instruction handout I did, and it literally was a piece of paper, and it followed the format like my colleagues, the things you're taught. And then I realized the students were like throwing it away and they weren't responding. So then I thought, well, what if I did a comic book splash page?
Oh my God.
And so then I started doing splash pages, and then, well, what if I just gave them a list of links, or what if I gave them a cool picture to look at? And so I was always sort of thinking, well, how can I attract their attention more? How can I not only attract their attention, but hold that attention? And then to get them to go back to it. And so, even at the end, before I left, we were using LibGuides. I would redesign things in my LibGuides as I would learn from not only my academic librarian counterparts, but also learning from people in, like basic K-12 librarians, 6-12 librarians, and learning about, how our school librarian counterparts are teaching students. Because I think that, one of the things that I've learned over the years is that it's great when we can look outside ourselves and look outside our community and learn more about what other people are doing. When I wanted to incorporate more technology in my instruction sessions, I started going to the local Teaching with Technology conference, which I was the only librarian there. Everybody else was an instructional technologist. But it was awesome because I learned all about different things that they were doing and different resources and tools that I could then share with my students. So I think, that's one of the things that I always encourage people to do is to, again, look beyond yourself and look beyond your community and think about, what voices aren't being told, but also, what can I learn? What new thing can I bring back, and how can I scale that to what I'm doing?
No, and it's important. I've always said that information settings such as libraries and archives and museums can become community settings, and so I see that directly being seen or heard through what you're saying, and I'm like all excited because it's true. They're becoming community spaces that belong to the community that they're in, and it's exciting to hear that, especially with all the partners you're developing. I mean, you're collaborating with. So, can you tell me a little bit about that? Because that's always been my interest, right? Collaboration and community partnerships. And what made you or directed you towards connecting with such individuals, and how did you go upon that?
Well, I think there are some people where I've had maybe a relationship with them. So I will say Arkansas is a pretty small state, so to speak. And so everybody's sort of a 6 degree of separation from somebody in the state, which is kind of the running joke here. But but the great thing about that is that oftentimes I'll meet somebody at a conference, or I'll meet somebody or hear about their work, and I'll say, I really want to work with that person. And Arkansas is one of those states where you can pick up the phone and say, hey, let's work together. Let's figure out how we can make this happen. My assistant director, Keontae Fletcher, wanted to work with the S.E. Person Museum. She had met the staff over there and said, hey, I think what you're doing is great. They have a museum that celebrates women's handbags and items in their handbags. And so she said, hey, how can we work together? And so basically they picked up the phone and started talking and said, hey, we've always wanted to do an exhibit on African-American women and their handbags. So let's try and put something together. And so that's the nice thing about being, I think, in a state such as ours, because there's this real sense of community among the museums, among cultural heritage museums and libraries and archives, that people want to sort of work together. But I also think that sometimes there's just synergy around something. We're now working on a partnership with AETN, which is our local PBS affiliate here. And we are doing they received a grant to host Henry Louis Gates' new documentary called And Still I Rise, Black America Since MLK. And they had done some work before with the museum, but really they were thinking, okay, we've heard good things about you, Christina, because you've been talking to the zoo and all these people around town, and let's see if we can work together. Let's see what kind of projects we both have going on and how we can really benefit each other and help each other. And so I'm really excited that we'll have that documentary showing here at the museum. We're also working with them on some longer-term projects in terms of STEM education and in terms of just letting people know about resources in the state available to them. So So oftentimes, like I said, those conversations start just by, hey, I just really want to work with you. I think you're a really great person. I just want to work with you. How can we make that happen? So.
That's cool. No, as a new professional in this career, I always like to ask how you all connect and how you all create these collaborations and partnerships. And so thank you for sharing that. It really makes me feel like, oh, this can be attainable if I have this idea, or this I really want to do this. It seems attainable after hearing what you said, because sometimes it is about just being
Yeah,
like
well,
you.
and I have to say that I think RUSA is one of those great networks that's
Yeah.
helpful with that as well. So collaborating in the state, I can pick up the phone, but I can just as easily do that with people. In my case, in RUSA history section,
Hmm.
or really within all of RUSA.
Yeah.
Um, the nice thing about RUSA is we're, I would say, one of the most diverse in terms of library type
Hmm. Yeah.
groups you will find
Yes.
in ALA. And we're working, I am confident that we are working to be more diverse in
Hmm.
terms of visual diversity
Yeah.
in RUSA. Um, and that's one of the things that's really important to me that we work towards. But definitely in terms of library type, we're probably one of the most diverse. And so it's really awesome when I can pick up the phone and just call somebody and ask their advice about something, or and know that they're the expert in doing that.
Yeah.
I can pick up the phone about a business reference question.
Yeah.
Just call somebody from Brass and ask them, or or whatever. And so that's really helpful. And I think that's, again, that collaborative nature is awesome that you have that. Because that's something I hope we never lose as librarians.
Yeah.
Because for me, I feel like that's so central to who we are, like to our profession. That's one of those core tenets of our profession, I feel like. So I think that's awesome that you've gotten that bug as well.
I know. I'm always there's so many interests and diversity in the career who from the people in RUSA, and I'm always like, oh, I want to talk to you and everyone, and so it's definitely been a benefit and a privilege to be able to talk to everyone, and hear what they're doing within these spaces, right? And so thank you for sharing that. My next question, talking about reference and reference services and RUSA, is how do you think reference plays a role within the new initiatives or the initiatives you've been talking about at your museum?
Yeah. So for me, I think reference is sort of core. Reference is about access.
Yes.
It's about access, at least for me, it's about access to information.
Yeah.
It's about helping people find the right answer,
Mm-hmm.
or helping them on their journey to find the right answer. And so that's one of the things that we do here at the museum is we help people sort of explore these issues of race.
Okay.
We had some folks in about a month ago, when all this stuff was going on, with the violence and things in the media,
Mm-hmm.
and they were coming to the museum or calling me and saying, okay, how do I respond to this?
Yeah.
What do I do? What's my next steps? And so one of the things we've been really exploring as a museum is how do we help people respond to that? And
Okay.
we're fortunate that we've got some great partners and folks in the community, like Just Communities of Arkansas,
Mm-hmm.
which do a great job of talking about race and ethnicity,
Okay.
in the state.
Yeah.
But I think, how do we as a museum respond?
Mm-hmm.
And part of that response is getting people the right answer, telling them the truth,
Mm-hmm.
but doing it in such a way that it encourages further exploration.
Okay.
And so one of the things people will often tell me when after they've gone through the museum is, just how their eyes were opened, that there were so many things they didn't know
Yeah.
about the world around them, about African Americans in the state. Prime example is our museum, and I think what really gives sort of, I guess, trying to find the word, sorry,
No. It's.
but helps people understand
Mm-hmm.
kind of where we are as a museum, is that a man was actually lynched on the site of our museum.
Jesus. Yeah.
And so it's pretty incredible to think that, right? That the man was
Yeah.
lynched there, and yet we have a museum today that celebrates African American achievements in Arkansas.
Wow.
And so, I think for a lot of people, that's a really sort of surreal thing.
Mm-hmm.
because we don't often think about those sort of tangibles of history.
Yeah.
And so again, it's helping them on that that path of exploration, helping them to understand their own privilege, helping them,
Yes.
the privilege of just not knowing,
Yeah.
right? Because in
Yeah.
many ways, that's a form of privilege of not knowing.
Exactly.
And so helping them to understand that, but also helping them to understand the world around them as they continue to explore and create relationships maybe with African Americans in their community. Arkansas in some ways is still segregated in parts of the state. And so, for us, one of the things I always hope people will leave with is a deep sense of, of really who is my neighbor and who is my community.
Yeah.
And what would my next steps be? So now that I understand that, that there were these things that happen, how do I then approach, the guy that lives down the street from me and have a real conversation about that? How do I continue to explore that through my own research? So I think that's all part of sort of that longer term of being a reference librarian, of helping people beyond just the initial question, right? That they come in the door with of, why am I here, or why is this museum here? But helping them to explore those sort of broader themes and the broader realities.
No, it's definitely important. And I think it's an interesting time how libraries can be spaces where we talk about race and racism and diversity within all this. And so I think it's important to talk about it and how these spaces and how reference is a huge part of these conversations and these initial conversations, and to get people to become more interested in acknowledging their privilege, just as you said. So I totally agree with you. I think um, I I've had these conversations with tons of people, and I think I don't until now I didn't realize how it relates to reference services. So you even gave me an insight, and I was like, "Whoa, these are the reference services does definitely play a role as an educator and as a librarian and as someone who does think it's important to have information settings as spaces where we do need to acknowledge these and how they've historically been spaces that have left out people of color and um, quote unquote marginalized communities. Um, so I think that's true. I think that's you gave me a very insightful, and I'm like, whoa, mind blown this early. Um, and so my next question following up that is, how has reference impacted your role as a librarian, as well as and as a director, as well as your philosophy and perspectives?
So I think that reference impacts me every day, right? So it impacts me in the way that I respond to my staff as their director, because for me, I'm always sort of a cliche, but I'm always sort of reading about how to be better at what I do. How to learn more about museums, how to be inspired and encouraged and challenged by more people. And so I always want to share that with my staff.
Okay.
So we've instituted a thing called Manager Mondays,
Oh, okay.
where every other Monday, on the second and fourth Mondays, we get together and we talk about an issue, like an issue related to business management, an issue related to something that we're dealing with as a staff.
Okay.
And we talk about how we can improve, how we can deal with that issue, how that article challenges us or makes us think about something different, if it helps us. So we think about those issues. So I think as director, providing those resources for my staff is really important to me, and I think that again is part of being a good reference librarian, right? We're always giving people, trying to find the best resources for people or to connect them with the best resources.
Yeah.
So that's one way I think tangibly, especially as a director, that I'm doing that.
Yeah.
I think as an employee, I always encourage, and again as a director, I always encourage my staff that whatever it is that our skill set is, like, let's be the best at it. Let's be rock stars at it. And so how can we be the experts in the state? I often, when I first came, people would always say, "Oh, you should ask so and so about this," or "You should ask so and so," and I would say, "Well, why are people saying I should ask my staff? Like, they need to be the experts, right?" And so I'm always encouraging them. What resources can I give you, or what resources can I help with to help you be better at your job? so that when people think of an issue, they always think, hey, I can call this person on your staff, and they'll know the answer to it. Or if they don't know the answer, they'll know the right person to point me to.
Yeah.
So, I think that's definitely, as a director, one of the things that I spend is one of my goals. I try to spend a lot of time doing is to kind of connect them with resources. But then, of course, with the broader community as well, connecting them with the resources, but also instructing them on resources.
Yeah.
We do a lot of educational outreach, so going to schools, going to Rotary clubs to talk about Black history, to talk about really local history. We are working to develop loan boxes that we can send out to people so that they can do experiments and learn and try and I guess learn at a deeper level about Black history without having to visit the museum.
Yeah.
So trying to think about what would it look like if the museum was more than just the four walls. Yeah. What would it look like if we blew out one of those walls and we expanded our walls elsewhere? If we had a wall in Fayetteville, Arkansas, which is about 3 hours from us, what would it look like to have a museum presence there?
Yeah.
What would it look like to have a museum presence in Des Arcs or in Ozark or any number of counties or cities in the state? So
yeah. Talk about making the museum mobile, right?
Yeah, I know. My staff got it. We had a bus accidentally delivered to the museum.
Well,
which is a long story. And they all got excited because they were like, "We're getting the bus. We're taking this on the road." I said, "No, we're not getting the bus. We got to figure out where this belongs to."
Yeah, but why? We could travel. We could talk about outreach and mobile.
I know, right? It'd be like a museum mobile instead of a bookmobile.
It's true. Yeah. See, these are new initiatives. You're
giving them more good ideas. I don't know.
No, I think working at LAPL, one of the things was making Steam mobile, and I was like, that sounds really cool, right? That you're traveling and you're getting to know places while also providing these services. So, I mean, you never know. Things are becoming more mobile, and you have these like taco trucks, like cupcake trucks now, and I'm just like, how can we make these into reference services,
Oh, yeah. I mean, that would be really cool. One of the things when I was in grad school at Simmons College in Boston was, I want to say it was the Boston Public Library had come up with this thing. They were trying to decide if they were going to put a branch of the library in Chinatown. Wow. And so they just did a pop-up library in Chinatown. And so they took over a storefront and they put a little library there. And so I think there's definitely something to that of thinking about spaces where we're not as libraries, as museums, and trying to figure out how do we become part of those spaces? Yeah. Not how do we take over those spaces, not how do we expose our influence in those spaces, but how do we use our resources to help those spaces to be partners, really. That's one of the words that I always would think of from academic library time was that I didn't help people do research, that I partnered with them to do research.
That's important.
Because really it was this process that we were doing together. Because I was learning something new. Oftentimes, a student would come to my desk and I would have no idea about their topic.
Exactly.
And I would learn something new and explore it with him. And I would say, I don't know the answer to that, but we'll find it together. So I think it's, thinking of ways that we can really partner with communities, to help them understand and to help, I guess, partner with communities to work better together would be the way that I would put it.
No, it's definitely true. It's not taking over, and it's not me being this educator, this know-it-all person. It's about, I might have these skills that could help you, but you definitely also have some thought and perspectives and skills that you could teach me. And so I truly believe that. I'm always like, no, that's why I love working with kids, is because I'm like, they can teach me so much. And I'm not the only one who can teach them. And I think it's a mutual understanding that I always approach everyone as being like, I can learn something from you that I haven't had the privilege to, or I've been closed off. And, so it's definitely important. And I totally agree. I'm always like, yes.
Yeah, and I'm always encouraged just knowing there are other people that are doing that. That it's not like I'm the only one who's thinking about that, but there are these sort of pioneers, folks like Samit Malik from the South Asian American Digital Archive,
Yeah.
who, really did a revolutionary thing by saying, hey, we want to collect your photos, but we don't want to own them.
Right.
Like, we just want digital copies of them, and we want to curate them, and we want to provide resources. Folks like that, or people like the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History, who are really sort of community-oriented and community-centered.
Yeah.
I think just knowing that there's a sort of group of folks that are interested in doing that. We always talk about, synchronicity here. And when 2 or 3 people have the same really good idea, then it's a really good idea.
Yeah.
If we all come up with the idea independent of each other, and then we come together and we all have the same idea, we're like, all right, we're doing it. That's awesome.
Yes. No. Well, that's important, I think. And it also shows the power of this idea and how important it is to address it, right? Where it's like, because sometimes I feel like, I don't like to call myself crazy, but am I the outrageous, the out of the box thinker or the radical one? But I'm like, so when the others are like, no, this is important, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not trying, thinking too much outside the box that's unattainable. Sometimes I'm like, oh, is this even? But so you're right, and I think it's important. So we're following up close to. I mean, we're about to hit the hour, so I always like to ask those who I interview and who are part of the podcast series a question about RUSA. And that question is, do you have any advice for those contemplating RUSA membership?
Oh, yeah. Join RUSA. That would be the short answer, join RUSA. I think the thing, as I mentioned before, RUSA is, the great thing about RUSA is that there are so many different types of libraries, and now I'm a museum person, involved in RUSA. And so that's one of the things I really love, is that we're such a resource-rich group of people. And so to date, I have never been able to, I've never asked someone in RUSA a question that I haven't been able to get the answer to, or they haven't been able to point me to the right answer. And I think that says a lot about the type of folks that are there, that kind of commitment to wanting to learn and be better at our jobs. In particular, I love history section. And I have to say, I was a member of a couple of different groups in ALA when I was sort of first kind of trying it out and dipping my toe in the water to see where I would fit. And I was really amazed at how welcoming people were in history section, how much they wanted to hear my ideas, how much they wanted to really think about digital stuff and how we can change and be stay abreast of just new skills and new ideas. And I was, I guess, surprised by that, because I think there's often this perception that we're the same people sitting at the reference desk pulling out the book, the New York desk reference book. That I think that's the perception for a lot of people of what reference is. And that's one aspect of reference, but that's not all reference is. There are reference librarians doing all sorts of crazy and awesome things and working with their community. And so, if I had to really define RUSA by one word, I would say it's definitely community. And so if people are looking for that, if they're looking for a place for community, a place to belong, a place where you can be on committees, where you can be included, where your voice matters, that RUSA is a great place to start in your kind of ALA librarian journey. It was a place where I, happily found my niche, and I'm always excited to just welcome new people and to think about, how we can diversify our experience. One of the big things we've been really pushing the history section is how can we, we're diverse in terms of our libraries. How can we be diverse in terms of our people? How can we encourage different experiences and different visual diversity, and different ethnic and religious diversity, and gender diversity in our group? Because we know that's present in ALA, and so how can we make our little enclave, of the umbrella? How can we make it more welcoming to people, and how can we explore those histories? So we'll be, I'm excited that we'll be exploring African American and Native American history at our pre-conference in Atlanta on January 20th, I think. Those are 2 topics we'll be talking about. We're also planning in Chicago to talk about immigrant history, so
Oh,
that'll be
okay.
really a great resource. So,
Yes.
I encourage people to join us, to get involved, to, send me an email. Any of our members are always happy to talk about ways they can get involved and ways they can, people can share their stories and connect with us. So,
Yeah, it's like making reference services your own, right? And to fit
yeah,
every individual. And I think
that
it
should be our new tagline. I
right?
like that.
There you go, quote. But no, it's truly important. I think it's not only libraries, right, that reference services applies to. As we've seen with your interview, is it can be in museums, and I think it was definitely interesting to talk to you about that, and talk about references within that, and how it's not about only being at the desk. It's about talking to your staff members and your employees in your community, and how reference can be served within that. And reference services is definitely part of that, right? By providing this exchange of information, and it reference services is definitely changing. And as I've seen throughout all these interviews, and talking to people and RUSA members such as yourself, so thank you for sharing and talking with me and answering all my questions, Christina.
Yeah, thank you for having me.